The winter wind howled through the gaps in the trailer's aluminum siding, rattling the thin walls as Violet Hayes sat hunched over a battered laptop in the cramped kitchen of her home in Ashford Springs, a forgotten town tucked into the frozen plains of rural Wyoming. The screen's pale glow illuminated the dark circles beneath her eyes, the kind that came from too many sleepless nights and too many unanswered prayers. Her daughter, 6-year-old Ruby, slept fitfully in the bedroom down the narrow hallway. Her breathing labored from the asthma that required medication Violet could barely afford. The medical bills were stacked beside the laptop, each envelope a reminder of everything slipping through her fingers. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Violet's fingers trembled as she typed, exhaustion making every keystroke feel like lifting stones. She had been awake for 19 hours straight, working her shift at the truck stop diner, then coming home to freelance graphic design work she did for pennies online. Her ex-husband, Tyler, had disappeared 8 months ago, leaving behind promises of support and nothing else. No calls, no money, just silence and the crushing weight of raising Ruby alone. Tonight, desperation had pushed her to a breaking point. She pulled up an old email thread from Tyler, searching for any mention of the construction company he'd bragged about working for. Apex something. She scrolled frantically through his messages until she found it buried in a forwarded joke email from 2 years ago, a casual mention of doing some work for Apex Global. The name meant nothing to her then. Tonight, she used it like a lifeline thrown into dark water. Her hands shook as she composed a new email, her vision blurring with angry tears. Subject: overdue support payment. Tyler, I know you got paid from that Apex Global contract. Ruby needs her inhaler refilled, and I'm 3 months behind on rent. If you don't send something by Friday, I'll contact Apex directly and tell them exactly what kind of man they're employing. Don't make me do this. The words were harsh, desperate, probably empty. But she was past caring about pride. She hit send before fear could stop her, then pressed her palms against her temples and closed her eyes. The laptop chimed almost immediately. Violet's eyes snapped open. That was too fast. Tyler never responded to anything quickly. She leaned forward, her stomach dropping as she read the sender's address. Callan@apexglobal.com. Not Tyler. Not his personal email. This was a corporate address. Her breath caught in her throat as the message loaded. Who is this? How did you get this email address? Panic seized her chest like a vice. She had misaddressed the email. Somehow, instead of sending it to Tyler's old account, she had sent it directly to someone at Apex Global. Someone who clearly wasn't supposed to receive angry messages about unpaid child support. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, typing frantically. I'm so sorry. Wrong person. Please disregard. She hit send, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her ears. Maybe it was just someone in HR. Maybe they'd delete it and move on. The response came in seconds. What do you know about the Apex contract? Her stomach lurched. Contract. She'd mentioned a contract in her email to Tyler. A contract she knew nothing about. She'd just made it up, a desperate bluff to shame her ex into responding. Before she could type a reply, another email appeared. 315 Meadowbrook Lane, Ashford Springs, Wyoming. Her full address. Violet gasped and slammed the laptop shut, stumbling back from the table as if the device itself had become venomous. Her hands flew to her mouth, her breath coming in short, sharp bursts. This wasn't possible. It had to be some kind of automated system, some algorithm that had pulled her information from somewhere. But the personal tone of the messages said otherwise. Someone knew where she lived. The wind outside shifted, and through the thin walls, she heard something that made her blood freeze. The distant hum of an aircraft engine, growing louder, closer, impossibly near for their tiny rural town that hadn't seen air traffic in years. Violet rushed to the window, pulling aside the threadbare curtain with trembling fingers. Through the darkness and swirling snow, she saw lights descending from the sky. Not the blinking red and white of a commercial plane, but the sleek, focused beams of something smaller, faster, more deliberate. A private jet. It descended beyond the edge of town, toward the empty winter fields where the old crop-dusting airstrip sat abandoned. Her phone buzzed on the counter. An unknown number. A text message. Stay where you are, Miss Hayes. I'm coming to you. Violet's legs gave out, and she sank against the wall, her whole body shaking. She looked toward Ruby's door, heard her daughter's soft, wheezing breath, and felt the world tilt beneath her. One wrong email. One desperate mistake. And now someone was landing a jet in her dying town in the middle of a winter night, coming for her. The knock came exactly 7 minutes after the text message. Not a pounding fist demanding entry, but 3 measured raps against the trailer's flimsy metal door. Calm, controlled, the sound of someone who knew there was nowhere for her to run. Violet stood frozen in the center of her kitchen, Ruby clutched against her chest. She'd woken her daughter the moment she saw the jet land, wrapping her in blankets with shaking hands, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. "Mommy, who's here?" Ruby's voice was small, confused, her brown eyes wide in the dim light. "I don't know, baby. Just stay quiet, okay?" Her phone buzzed again. Another text from the unknown number. "Miss Hayes, I'm not here to harm you, but we need to talk. Now." Violet's throat constricted. She had considered calling the police, but what would she say? That she'd sent a threatening email to the wrong person, and now someone had landed a private jet in response. They'd think she was insane, or worse, wasting their time with some elaborate prank. The knock came again, patient but insistent. She moved toward the door on legs that felt like water, one arm wrapped protectively around Ruby. Through the small window, she could see 2 figures silhouetted against the swirling snow. One tall and broad-shouldered in a long dark coat. The other larger still, clearly a bodyguard, scanning the trailer park with professional vigilance. Violet's hand trembled as she turned the lock. The door opened to reveal a man she had only seen in business magazines left behind at the diner. Jonah Callender, founder and CEO of Apex Global Industries, whose technology empire had reshaped telecommunications across 3 continents. His net worth was something she couldn't even conceptualize, a number with so many zeros it became meaningless. And he was standing on her crumbling concrete step, snowflakes melting on the shoulders of what was clearly a $10,000 coat. He was younger than she expected, maybe 38, with sharp features carved from stone and ice blue eyes that assessed her in a single sweeping glance. His dark hair was slightly disheveled from the wind, but everything else about him radiated absolute control. Behind him stood a mountain of a man in tactical gear, his hand resting near his hip in a way that suggested weapons Violet didn't want to think about. "Miss Hayes." Jonah's voice was deep, clipped, carrying the accent of old money and elite boarding schools. "May I come in?" It wasn't really a question. Violet stepped back, clutching Ruby tighter. The 2 men entered, bringing with them the scent of expensive cologne and winter air. The bodyguard's eyes swept the cramped space with professional efficiency, taking in every detail, every potential threat in her threadbare home. Jonah's gaze moved from the stacked medical bills to the laptop still glowing on the table, then finally settled on Ruby, who stared at him with unfiltered curiosity. "I don't understand," Violet managed, her voice cracking. "I sent an email to the wrong person. That's all. I don't know anything about your company. I swear." Jonah pulled his phone from his pocket, tapping the screen before holding it out to her. Her own words glowed in damning clarity. "I know you got paid from that Apex Global contract. If you don't send something by Friday, I'll contact Apex directly." His voice was measured, dangerous. "This email reached my private address." The phrase, Apex Global Contract, matches language tied to a security breach we discovered 48 hours ago. Corporate espionage. Stolen technology worth $4 billion. Violet's legs nearly gave out. $4 billion, no. No, I made that up. My ex-husband mentioned Apex once, years ago. I was desperate. I just wanted him to. Your ex-husband. Jonah's eyes sharpened. Name. Tyler Hayes. But he's just a construction worker. He wouldn't. The bodyguard pressed a finger to his earpiece, his gravelly voice cutting through the tension. "Sir, we have movement. 2 vehicles approaching from the South Road. Not local plates." Jonah's entire demeanor shifted in an instant. He turned to Violet, his presence suddenly overwhelming. "How much do you want your daughter to live?" The question hit like a physical blow. Ruby whimpered against her chest. "What? The people who stole from me are professionals. If they think you know something, they'll extract that information. They won't care that you're innocent. They won't care about her." His eyes flicked to Ruby with something that might have been concern beneath the ice. Violet's world spun. This is insane. I'm nobody. I'm just. You became somebody the moment you sent that email. Jonah moved closer, his shadow falling over her. I can protect you. Or I can leave you here and let them find out for themselves that you know nothing. But by then, it will be too late. Outside, headlights cut through the darkness. Two black SUVs rolling slowly through the trailer park, their tinted windows reflecting nothing. The bodyguard spoke urgently. Sir, we need to move. Now. Violet looked at Ruby, at her daughter's pale face and frightened eyes, at the inhaler sitting on the counter that she couldn't afford to refill. Then she looked at Jonah Calendar, this stranger who had descended from the sky, like something out of a fever dream. If I go with you, she whispered, what happens to us? His answer was ice-cold truth. You stay alive long enough for me to find out if you're a threat or a victim. The SUV's engines rumbled closer. Ruby's small voice broke the silence. Mommy, I'm scared. Violet made her decision in a heartbeat. Okay, we'll go. Jonah nodded once, then gestured to his bodyguard. Get them to the jet. Secure perimeter. Everything happened in a blur. The bodyguard, who Jonah called Quinn, wrapped a thermal blanket around Ruby and lifted her with surprising gentleness. Violet grabbed her laptop and Ruby's medication, shoving them into a backpack with shaking hands. Jonah placed a hand on her back, not rough, but absolutely firm, guiding her toward the door. Stay close. Don't run. Don't look back. They stepped into the winter night, and Violet saw the SUVs stopped at the end of the gravel road, men in dark clothing emerging from the vehicles. Move, Jonah commanded. Quinn led them through the backyards of darkened trailers, avoiding the main paths, while another guard materialized from the shadows to cover their retreat. The snow crunched beneath their feet, each step feeling impossibly loud. Ruby clung to Quinn's neck, her small face buried against his shoulder, while Violet stumbled through the drifts beside Jonah. His hand never left her back, keeping her upright, keeping her moving. The jet waited in the field beyond the trailer park, sleek and white against the darkness, its engines already spinning up. The stairs descended like a portal to another world. Quinn carried Ruby up first. Violet hesitated at the threshold, looking back at the only home she'd known, at the amber lights of Ashford Springs fading into the storm. Jonah's voice was quiet but absolute. This is the only choice that keeps her breathing. Violet climbed the stairs. The door sealed behind them with hydraulic finality, cutting away the wind and the danger. The interior was all cream leather and polished wood, warm and impossibly clean. Ruby was already strapped into a seat, Quinn checking her seatbelt with careful precision. Violet sank into the seat beside her daughter, her whole body trembling as the jet began to move. Jonah sat across from them, his eyes never leaving her face, studying her like a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. The jet lifted off, pressing them back into seats softer than any bed Violet had ever owned. Through the window, Ashford Springs shrank to pinpricks of light, then disappeared entirely into the vast Wyoming darkness. Ruby's small hand found hers, squeezing tight, and Violet realized with crushing certainty that her old life was gone. One email had rewritten everything. The jet leveled off at cruising altitude, and the cabin lights dimmed to a soft amber glow. Violet sat rigid in the leather seat, one arm wrapped around Ruby, who had finally stopped trembling. Her daughter's breathing had steadied, the warmth and filtered air of the jet easier on her lungs than the drafty trailer had ever been. Jonah Calendar sat across from them in the facing seat, his fingers steepled beneath his chin, those ice-blue eyes never wavering from Violet's face. The silence stretched taut as a wire, broken only by the steady hum of the engines and Ruby's soft breathing. Finally, Violet found her voice. Where are you taking us? Denver, Jonah replied, his tone matter-of-fact. I have a secure facility there. Penthouse level. You'll be safe while I determine what's happening. Safe, she repeated bitterly. You dragged us onto a plane in the middle of the night. That doesn't feel like safety. His expression didn't change. The alternative was letting armed professionals question you about information you don't have. I've seen what they do to extract answers. You wouldn't have survived it. Your daughter certainly wouldn't have. The words hit like ice water. Violet pulled Ruby closer, her voice dropping to a fierce whisper. I told you, I don't know anything. I made it up. I was trying to scare my ex into sending money for her medicine. Jonah leaned forward slightly, his gaze intense. Then explain how your exact phrasing matches internal communications from our compromised server. I can't explain it. It was a coincidence, a horrible, terrible coincidence. He studied her face as if reading a complex algorithm, searching for deception in the micro-movements of her features. After a long moment, he leaned back. Perhaps, but coincidences in my world tend to be designed. Quinn appeared from the cockpit, carrying a tablet. He leaned down, murmuring something to Jonah that Violet couldn't hear. Jonah's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly as he scrolled through whatever was on the screen. He looked up, his voice colder than before. Your ex-husband, Tyler Hayes. He's not just a construction worker. Violet's stomach dropped. What do you mean? Jonah turned the tablet toward her. Security camera footage showed Tyler in what looked like an upscale restaurant, shaking hands with men in expensive suits. The timestamp read, 3 days ago. Those men work for Meridian Tech, our primary competitor. Tyler has been meeting with them for 6 weeks. The words didn't make sense. Violet shook her head, her voice rising. Tyler barely graduated high school. He worked construction, landscaping, whatever paid cash. He's not some corporate spy. No, Jonah agreed. But he's someone they could use. Someone desperate enough, reckless enough, to pass along information for the right price. Violet felt like she was drowning. What information? He doesn't know anything about technology. Jonah's eyes narrowed. But you do. She blinked, confused. I'm a waitress. Who freelances as a graphic designer? Who has access to client files, corporate logos, internal communications? He paused, watching her reaction. Did Tyler ever ask you about your freelance work? About the companies you designed for? The memory hit her like a slap. 3 months ago, Tyler had shown up drunk at the trailer, rambling about needing money. He'd asked what clients she was working with, whether any of them were big companies that might pay better. She'd told him to leave. But before that, months earlier, she had done some logo work for a local tech startup. They'd mentioned being acquired by a larger firm. She'd barely paid attention to the details, just grateful for the $200 they'd paid her. Her voice came out hollow. I did some design work last year. For a company called, I can't remember the name. Something digital. Jonah's expression sharpened. Cascade Digital. Maybe. Yes, I think so. Cascade Digital was acquired by Apex Global 8 months ago. Their servers were integrated into our network. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to something almost gentle, almost dangerous. You had access to their internal files during the acquisition period. Violet's world tilted. I designed a logo. That's all. I never looked at anything else. I wouldn't even know what I was looking at. But your login credentials would have system access. If someone had your passwords, your email. He trailed off, watching understanding dawn across her face. Her laptop. Tyler had been at the trailer 2 months ago, claiming he wanted to see Ruby. Violet had left him alone for 10 minutes while she walked their daughter to the neighbor's house. When she came back, he was sitting at her laptop, claiming he'd just been checking sports scores. He used my computer, she whispered. He could have. Installed keylogging software. Cloned your credentials. Yes. Jonah's voice was steel wrapped in frost. Tyler Hayes didn't need to understand technology. He just needed to give someone else access to yours. Rage and betrayal crashed over Violet in waves. Tyler hadn't just abandoned them. He'd used her, used their daughter, used the desperation he'd created to turn Violet into an unwitting accomplice. Ruby stirred against her chest, mumbling in her sleep. Daddy. The words shattered something in Violet's chest. She pressed her lips to Ruby's hair, tears burning hot against her eyelids. Jonah's voice softened by a fraction. I need your laptop. Quinn will scan it, trace whatever Tyler installed. She nodded numbly, pulling the battered device from her backpack and handing it over. Quinn disappeared toward the back of the jet with it. The silence that followed felt heavier than before. Violet stared out the window at the darkness beyond, at the pinprick stars scattered across the void. What happens now? She asked quietly. Now we find out how deep this goes. How much was stolen? Who else is involved? Jonah paused. And what to do about Tyler Hayes? Violet's hands clenched into fists. He's Ruby's father. He's a criminal who put you and your daughter in lethal danger for money. I know, she whispered, her voice breaking. I know what he is. But she still asks for him. She still thinks. She couldn't finish the sentence. Jonah watched her with an expression she couldn't read. After a long moment, he said, I lost someone once. Someone who trusted the wrong people, who thought loyalty meant protecting those who didn't deserve it. His voice was quiet, controlled, but something raw lurked beneath. By the time I realized what was happening, it was too late to save him. Violet looked up, meeting his eyes. For the first time, she saw past the cold authority to something deeper, something wounded. "Your brother?" she guessed. He nodded once, barely perceptible. He believed in second chances. It killed him. The weight of those words settled between them like stone. Violet understood what he was telling her, what he was warning her about. But when she looked down at Ruby's sleeping face, she couldn't reconcile the smiling man in her daughter's memories with the monster Jonah was describing. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, making her jump. She pulled it out with shaking hands. A text from Tyler's number. "I know where you are. Bring Ruby back or you'll regret it." Violet's breath caught. She showed the screen to Jonah, whose expression turned to carved granite. He took the phone, his voice deadly calm. "He's not getting near either of you again." Quinn returned from the cockpit, his face grim. "Sir, we have a problem. Someone leaked flight plans. 3 separate news outlets are reporting that Jonah Calendar is traveling with an unidentified woman and child." Violet's stomach plummeted as Jonah pulled up his own phone, scrolling through headlines that were already spreading across the internet. Tech billionaire's secret family? Jonah Calendar spotted with mystery woman and daughter. Grainy photos taken at the airstrip in Ashford Springs showed Quinn carrying Ruby, Violet stumbling through the snow beside Jonah. The angles made it look intimate, protective, damning. Violet felt her world crumbling. No, this will ruin everything. People will think. Let them think what they want. Jonah cut in, his voice hard. Your safety matters more than reputation. But Violet knew better. In a town like Ashford Springs, reputation was survival. The diner would fire her. Ruby's school would treat her differently. Tyler would use this against her in any custody battle. Her old life wasn't just gone. It was burning down behind her, and there was no going back to the ashes. The jet touched down at a private airfield outside Denver, just as dawn broke across the Rocky Mountains, painting the snow-capped peaks in shades of rose and gold. Violet had barely slept, her mind spinning with headlines and betrayal, while Ruby dozed fitfully against her shoulder. Jonah had spent most of the flight in intense conversation with Quinn and other members of his team who'd joined via video conference. She'd caught fragments of their discussion, encrypted servers, traced IP addresses, names she didn't recognize. The language of a world she'd never imagined being part of. Now, as the jet taxied to a stop, Jonah finally turned his attention back to her. "There's a car waiting. We'll go directly to the tower." Violet nodded, too exhausted to argue. Ruby stirred as they descended the stairs into the crisp mountain air, blinking sleepily at the unfamiliar surroundings. "Mommy, where are we?" "Somewhere safe, baby," Violet whispered, though she wasn't sure she believed it herself. The drive into Denver was a blur of highway and glass towers, the city waking up around them. Jonah sat in silence, his fingers moving across his phone screen with practiced efficiency, while Quinn drove with the same professional vigilance he'd shown in Ashford Springs. They pulled into an underground garage beneath a building that seemed to pierce the sky itself. Security barriers rose at their approach, cameras tracking their movement with mechanical precision. The elevator ride to the penthouse felt like ascending into another dimension. When the doors opened, Violet stepped into a space that defied every definition of home she'd ever known. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed Denver sprawling below them, the mountains rising in the distance like sentinels. The interior was all clean lines and subtle luxury. Polished concrete floors, custom furniture that probably cost more than her trailer, art pieces she recognized from magazines. Ruby's eyes went wide. "Mommy, is this a castle?" Despite everything, Violet felt her lips twitch. "Something like that." Jonah gestured toward a hallway. "There are bedrooms down there. Take whichever one you want. Get some rest." But before Violet could respond, Quinn appeared with his tablet, his expression grave. "Sir, you need to see this." Jonah took the device, his jaw tightening as he read. When he looked up at Violet, something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Tyler Hayes was arrested 2 hours ago. Denver PD picked him up at a motel near the airport. Violet's breath caught. "What?" "He flew here. Followed us." Jonah's voice was ice. He had a gun, fake credentials claiming to be Ruby's legal guardian, and a court document, forged, demanding her return. The room spun. Violet gripped the back of a chair to steady herself. He was going to take her. He was going to try. Jonah's eyes locked onto hers. The police found text messages on his phone. Communications with the same Meridian Tech operatives we've been tracking. They offered him $500,000. For what? But even as she asked, Violet knew. For Ruby. As leverage against you, to force you to provide ongoing access to our systems. Jonah's voice was deadly calm. They assumed you knew more than you do. Tyler was willing to sell his own daughter to people who would use her as a hostage. Violet's legs gave out. She sank into the chair, her whole body shaking. Ruby, oblivious to the conversation, had wandered to the windows, pressing her small hands against the glass. I don't understand, Violet whispered. How could he? She's his daughter. His own child. Jonah crouched in front of her, bringing himself to her eye level. For the first time, his expression softened into something almost human. Desperation makes people into monsters, or reveals the monsters they always were. Tears streamed down Violet's face. What happens to him now? Federal custody. The charges include corporate espionage, attempted kidnapping, conspiracy. Jonah paused. He'll be in prison for a very long time. Part of Violet wanted to feel relief. Instead, she just felt hollow. Ruby would grow up knowing her father was a criminal, that he'd tried to sell her like property. How could she ever explain that to a 6-year-old? As if sensing her mother's distress, Ruby turned from the window. Mommy, why are you crying? Violet wiped her eyes, forcing a smile she didn't feel. I'm just tired, sweetheart. Ruby crossed to her, wrapping small arms around her neck. Don't be sad. The nice man will keep us safe. Violet's eyes met Jonah's over her daughter's shoulder. He stood slowly, something unreadable crossing his features. Ruby, he said quietly, are you hungry? She nodded enthusiastically. Quinn will take you to the kitchen. I think we have pancakes. Ruby's face lit up, and she skipped off with Quinn without hesitation, leaving Violet and Jonah alone in the vast living room. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken things. You didn't have to do any of this, Violet finally said. You could have just handed us over to the FBI, let them sort it out. Jonah moved to the windows, his back to her. I could have. So why didn't you? He was quiet for a long moment, his reflection ghostly against the glass. My brother was 26 when he died. Brilliant, idealistic, convinced he could change the world with the right technology. His voice was controlled, but she heard the fracture beneath. Someone he trusted sold his research to competitors. When he confronted them, they destroyed his reputation, his company, his life. He drove into a lake one night. They ruled it an accident. Violet's chest tightened. I'm so sorry. He had a daughter, 3 years old at the time. Jonah turned to face her, and for the first time, she saw real emotion in those ice-blue eyes. After he died, his ex-wife took her and disappeared. Changed their names, moved overseas. I've spent 10 years trying to find them, to make sure they're safe, to tell my niece that her father wasn't what the world claimed he was. Understanding crashed over Violet. Ruby reminds you of her. He nodded slowly. When she asked if I was going to be her new dad, something, he trailed off, shaking his head. I couldn't let history repeat itself. Couldn't let another child lose everything because the adults in her life were too corrupt or too cowardly to protect her. Violet stood, crossing to where he stood by the windows. The city stretched endlessly below them, full of people living ordinary lives, unaware of the extraordinary drama playing out in the tower above them. Thank you, she whispered, for protecting her, for believing me. Jonah's gaze dropped to her face, and something shifted in the air between them. The space felt suddenly smaller, charged with an electricity that had nothing to do with danger and everything to do with the two broken people standing in the morning light. Before either could speak, Quinn's voice called from the kitchen. Sir, you need to see this. Now. The moment shattered. Jonah moved quickly to the kitchen, Violet following close behind. Quinn had his tablet open to a news broadcast. The headline made Violet's blood run cold. Breaking. Explosion at Meridian Tech headquarters. Multiple casualties. The footage showed smoke billowing from a glass tower across town, emergency vehicles swarming the scene. Jonah's expression went dark. When, 20 minutes ago, initial reports suggest a targeted bombing. Quinn's voice was grim. Sir, 3 of the men Tyler was meeting with were in that building. Violet felt the floor tilt beneath her. You think someone Someone is cleaning up loose ends. Jonah finished, his voice deadly calm. Which means whoever is behind this is still out there. And they know Tyler was arrested. He turned to Quinn. Full lockdown. No one in or out without my authorization. Double the security detail. Quinn nodded and disappeared, already speaking urgently into his phone. Jonah looked at Violet, and she saw the truth in his eyes before he spoke it. This isn't over. Tyler was just a pawn. The real enemy is still playing. The week that followed the Meridian Tech bombing passed in a blur of FBI interviews, security briefings, and the strange liminal space of living in Jonah Callender's penthouse while her old life burned to ash 2 states away. Violet learned that the explosion had killed 4 people, including 2 of the men Tyler had been photographed with. The third had vanished, presumably fled or already dead. The investigation revealed a conspiracy far deeper than anyone had imagined. Stolen technology, international buyers, a network of corporate espionage that had been operating for years. Tyler, facing federal charges, had agreed to cooperate fully in exchange for a reduced sentence. 20 years instead of life. Violet had refused to see him, refused his calls, refused everything except the legal documents terminating his parental rights. Ruby deserved better than a father who'd tried to sell her. Through it all, Jonah had been a constant presence. Not hovering, not controlling, but there, a steady force in the chaos. He worked from the penthouse most days, his office door open, the low murmur of conference calls filling the space. Sometimes Violet would find him reading to Ruby before bed, his deep voice transforming simple children's stories into something profound. One evening, as Ruby slept peacefully in the guest room that had become hers, Violet found Jonah standing at the windows, silhouetted against the Denver skyline. Couldn't sleep? She asked quietly. He turned, and in the low light, he looked younger, less like the ruthless so the world knew. Too much on my mind. She moved to stand beside him, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body. The investigation? Among other things. He was quiet for a moment. The FBI found my niece. She's in London, healthy, safe. Her mother remarried, changed their names legally. She's 14 now. Violet's breath caught. Jonah, that's wonderful. I spoke to her yesterday. She doesn't remember me, doesn't remember her father. His voice was carefully neutral, but she heard the pain beneath. Her mother told her he abandoned them, that he was a fraud who took his own life rather than face justice. That's not true. No, but it's the story she's lived with. He turned to face Violet fully. I offered to help financially. Her mother refused. Said they didn't need my guilt money. Violet's hand found his without thinking, her fingers lacing through his. I'm sorry. He looked down at their joined hands, something shifting in his expression. For 10 years, I told myself that if I could just find her, just make sure she was safe, it would make up for failing my brother. But she doesn't need me. She has a life, a family. I'm just a stranger with the same last name as a man she's been taught to forget. You saved us, Violet said softly. Ruby and me. You gave us a chance when you could have just walked away. Jonah's thumb brushed across her knuckles, the gesture achingly tender. You gave me something too. A reason to remember why I started all of this in the first place. Not for money or power, but to protect people who can't protect themselves. The air between them felt electric, charged with everything unspoken. Violet's heart hammered as Jonah stepped closer, his free hand rising to cup her cheek. I need you to understand something, he said, his voice low and intense. This isn't gratitude. This isn't some savior complex. When I look at you, when I see how fiercely you've fought for your daughter, how you've survived everything thrown at you. He trailed off, searching her face. You're the strongest person I've ever met. Tears pricked Violet's eyes. I'm terrified all the time. That's what makes you brave. His forehead touched hers, their breath mingling in the small space between them. Stay? Not because you're in danger, not because you have nowhere else to go. Stay because you want to. The words echoed the promise she'd been too afraid to name. She thought of Ruby, sleeping peacefully for the first time in years. She thought of the graphic design contracts Jonah's team had quietly arranged, real clients paying real money for her work. She thought of the life they could build here, not based on necessity, but on choice. I want to, she whispered, but I'm scared of what that means. So am I. His admission surprised her. I've spent a decade building walls. You walked through them like they were made of paper. She laughed softly, tears spilling over. I sent one wrong email. Best mistake of my life. And then he kissed her, gentle and careful, as if she were something precious that might shatter. When they finally pulled apart, Violet rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Through the windows, Denver glittered below them, full of possibility. What happens now? She asked. Now we figure it out together. 18 months later, Violet stood in a sunlit studio space in downtown Denver, surrounded by bolts of fabric and design sketches pinned to every wall. Hayes' design company had grown from a one-woman operation to a team of 5, with clients across 3 states and a waiting list that stretched into next year. Ruby's laughter echoed from the corner where she sat with a sketch pad, drawing elaborate princess gowns with the same creative fire that burned in her mother. Her asthma was under control, her confidence blooming, her questions about her father growing fewer as new, happier memories took their place. The door chimed, and Jonah entered, still in his suit from whatever board meeting had occupied his morning. But his eyes softened when they found Violet, the way they always did. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded, grabbing her coat. They had a meeting with the lawyer finalizing Ruby's adoption papers. Jonah had asked months ago if he could adopt her, if he could be the father she deserved rather than the one biology had given her. Ruby had answered by throwing her arms around his neck and whispering, "Does this mean you're my real dad now?" As they walked to the car, Ruby's small hand in Jonah's, Violet thought about that desperate night in Ashford Springs. The wrong email that had felt like the end of everything. It had been the beginning. The Blacktown car pulled up, not a reminder of fear anymore, but a symbol of the family they'd chosen to become. Ruby climbed in chattering about her drawings, while Jonah held the door for Violet, his hand finding hers as it always did. She looked back one last time at the studio, at the life she'd built from the ashes of the old one, and felt something she'd never quite believed in before. Hope. Real, solid, unshakable hope. One wrong email had changed everything, but it had changed it into something beautiful, something worth fighting for, something that felt impossibly, wonderfully like home. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.